I want to introduce somebody who did something very special at the castle, and that is Diana Zimmerman, who was the source behind the junior program. And some of the talent that has come out from that program has been phenomenal. And it was kind of a little bit of a rocky road getting it started, and I'm hoping she'll share some of that information with us. So there you are. Oh, looks like you're singing in the hallway at the castle. Must be a Zoom trick. How are you today?
I'm great. What wonderful stories, Howard. I have to say, Howard, that it's a golden year every day I go to the castle and see you sitting there. It's just such a wonderful joy and everything. And everybody, the story, Steve, I remember when you were a kid.
That's right.
Just such a wonderful story. In fact, it's so funny because I came to the castle in 1967. I was 18 years old, but because I had won so many trophies and everything, Bill and Milt made an exception and they let me perform there and they let me come in every night. I got a little luckier than Steve. And I did my first show there when I was 19 in 1968, which I think was probably the youngest woman ever to perform there. So.
Probably the only woman at that point.
Gary Larson might have performed it. I
Jerry.
don't know. I'm still trying to verify that.
Well, and you were performing there early on. So, I arrived in '74. So what? And I really watched your act. You were doing the gramophone act at that point, which was great. And then I watched it transfer into being the pickpocketing act, which was the most commercial thing I'd ever seen. A beautiful woman doing great magic and picking men's pockets. I just looked at that and went, "Wow!" And then, of course, you've gone on to do so many other things. You've become a very successful corporate producer and a best-selling author with your. So, boy, you've done it all. But that junior membership. Tell me how that started, because obviously what we're hearing is that certain junior people could get into the castle, they could maybe perform there, there was something going on, and I want to, later on I'm going to bring back in, I want to hear from Steve again, because Joe Berg had a group I didn't know about, but you started the junior membership. So how did that come about?
Well, the very first time I worked there, as I said, I was 19. It was in the old wine cellar before we had a Palace of Mystery, before that hallway was even built. And I stepped out onto the stage. Remember, this is a little girl from the wrong side of the tracks in South Phoenix. And I stepped out on that stage and Cary Grant was sitting in the front row. And I'm like, okay. So I did my show. Afterwards, I went upstairs. Cary was in the line. Unlike some celebrities that go to the Magic Castle, Cary always stood in line. He never, used his power. He was standing in line at the old festal board. I don't know how many of you remember the festal board, but this big salad bar. And he got out of the line and he walked over to me and he says, "Cary Grant here. Oh, Diana, I must tell you, I loved your show." And so we became friends after that. And for 4 years during this time, even with my ex-husband on the board, I wanted to get a youth program going because the Rabbit Center Hat Magic Club in Phoenix, Arizona, which just celebrated a big anniversary yesterday, had a youth program. And it's the reason I was able to be in magic. Vernon taught me the wand spin when I was 13 because he came to lecture to our group. And so I said, I had been trying and I kept getting no. Ron Wilson, who's a lovely man, but hated the kids being around, was very, very, didn't want them around. And a number of the board members back then, my ex-husband wasn't on the board at that time, didn't want there to be a youth program. So even when my ex-husband and Peter Pitt, who's one of the great characters of the castle, got on the board, we still couldn't get a youth program going. So one night, fast forward 4 years later, I'm sitting with Cary Grant at the bar. He says, "Diana, it's a shame there's no way for kids to be involved in the Magic Castle other than just occasionally." And I said, "Cary, I've been trying to get this program going forever." He says, "You come with me." And he marches me into the board meeting that was going on that night. He was on the board. My ex-husband's in the room glaring at me like, "What is Diana up to now?" I could see Dick sliding down in his chair. And And I said, well, I'd like to start a youth program, a club sponsored by the Magic Castle. And I think it would be a great way to help train future development. And I went into my little spiel, and then I got the heck out of there. And 5 minutes later, Cary came running, Diana, they're going to let us do it. They're going to let us have a program. Now, I was on the House committee with somebody named Nick Lewin. Jerry Blount was also on that committee. And so I'm going to the next House committee meeting, telling them what's going to happen. And Nick volunteered and Jerry Blount volunteered, all to help me put this youth idea together. And so we had our very first auditions. 100 kids showed up. We picked 50. Rick Gerber, who's on our board of directors now, was the first member selected. And Nick and we all sat through these auditions and everything. It wasn't at the council. They were at the...
That was at the Maskers Club.
Maskers, yeah. And the program, that was, we had our first meeting in 1975 after this hallway was built in the new Palace of Mystery. And we still had a lot of complaints from Ron Wilson and a lot of the members that they didn't want the kids hanging around. And there were about a half dozen times when I had to go to battle to try to keep the program going. John Thompson was helpful in having it keep going because they were going to quit. They were going to just stop it. And there just was a lot of the older curmudgeon members. Vi Vernon was very adamant against having the kids. In his later years, he got very crotchety. And you know, a number of the people. Now, Bruce Servan was very supportive of the program, I will say that. But a lot of the older members didn't want the kids around. So I'd have to go every 4 or 5 years to the board and do my pitch. And thank goodness Peter Pitt and Dick Zimmerman and Bill Larson and Irene were huge supporters of the junior program. So we are now celebrating 1975 to our 43rd anniversary.
And just so everyone knows who's here, how about naming just a few of the people? That's going to be just a few of the people who came through that program.
Well, my goodness, we've produced three world champions, including Jason Latimer, which I helped him with his clear cups and balls. And let's see who else. Obviously, there was, I'm trying to remember all the kids that have won awards. Ed Alonzo, of course, was a member of the program. There's just so many kids. It's just unbelievable that we have 2 on the board right now, Ed and Rick Gerber, who, as I said, was our first junior member.
Neil Patrick Harris was...
He was a little bit older, so he didn't get to join. But
was Neil Patrick Harris on the part
Neil
of the
Patrick
program?
Harris was a member, yeah. And just shortly after he got accepted in, he got the Doogie Howser part. So we didn't see a lot of him, but he's a big supporter and still is of the program and a wonderful, wonderful guy. But yeah, so we've had quite a few. We have a junior member now who's also an actor and in one of the TV shows, one of the hot TV shows right now. So, and then Collins Key, who went on to be the very first magician. I designed 6 of the 8 tricks that he did on America's Got Talent. And he went on to be the very first magician to place in the finals. We knew he wasn't going to win. He knew he wasn't going to win because he wouldn't sign their agreement. He wouldn't sign their 7-year agreement to give all this money to them. So they told him he wouldn't win, but he did come in 4th because they didn't want him in the top 3. That the voting on that, in case you don't know, is not exactly legitimate.
No. I remember. Do you remember the old before AMT? There was a show. Ed McMahon hosted the show. Star Search.
Yeah.
And I remember Michael Finney went to do that, and he was really pumped about the whole thing. And then he checked at the hotel about, and they said, "Oh no, you're checking out tomorrow morning." He said, "Well, no, we haven't got the results yet." They said, "No, you're checking out tomorrow." So that, I guess, has always been the case. Well, you did a wonderful job, and of course we have to talk about Bob Dorian. I mean, Bob was the person who really was your right-hand person, wasn't he?
Yeah, there was a point where being a female magician at the Magic Castle wasn't always the most popular thing to be, mainly because by that time I was making $5,000 to do a show and most of the boys were making $500. And so I guess I rubbed a few people the wrong way, and they decided one day that they didn't want me to be the chairman of the junior program anymore. And so this was the board of directors. And so Bob Dorian took over and did a wonderful job. And Bob was the chairperson of the program for some 20 some years and did a great job. But the program now has two truly extraordinary people that have taken over, Steve Barnes and David Doyle. And what they've done with the program, we're launching a whole international membership now, so that kids all over the world, before you couldn't be part of the program because there was no way to participate, but now we're going to be doing Zoom. And so kids from all over the world can now join the program and be part of the program, which has always been a dream of mine.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Zoom.
I was one of the things, I didn't really mention this to anybody. I mean, this is just our limited group, because I really like to keep these kind of intimate, these events. But maybe I think with some of the stories that are coming out already, maybe we should do a screening so that the junior members and some of the castle people, maybe on Facebook or YouTube or something, and share this, because there are some great stories about those days and histories that maybe they don't know about.
Oh,
I would ask you, if I may,
the whole history of the program is absolutely extraordinary, and the people that have come out of it. It's just,
it is.
Mark Halen and Ginger. I mean, they were also Long Beach Mystics, but it's been now today, I have to say, the junior program is the pride of the castle.
Well, and the Long Beach Mystics, I always refer to them as the Illuminati of magic, because whatever
the best
happens,
magic club ever, the best magic.
Yeah, whatever happens, you find that there's a Long Beach Mystic is somewhere involved or behind it. I think they're shadowy and pull the strings, but in many ways, a lot of those people came over to the castle program because, of course, they had that opportunity to work at the castle, which must have been very exciting for them. But I wanted to ask you, we brushed over it earlier. It must have been very difficult for you coming in, performing in the castle. Did you find a lot of resentment from male members, or did you get a lot of encouragement? Probably a bit of each, but let me
a bit of each is a really good example. I think, as any high profile magician does. I mean, look what they've done to Chris Angel. Look what they've did to David Copperfield. Look what they did to Siegfried and Roy when they were surfing. There's a group of boys at the castle, and they are boys that really are very resentful and very jealous of anyone that succeeds. Because I was a woman, because I was doing so well. I mean, I was immediately became the #1 lady magician in the world, thanks to a good PR guy. There were only 3 back then, 3 performers. And so I started doing a lot. And then when I started treading into areas such as the thumb tie, which became a signature trick of mine, and then the pickpocket act, which every magician, every single magician, from Di Vernon to Bruce Servan to whatever, all said girls shouldn't do pickpocketing, except for one. And that was my teacher, whose name went right out of my head. But anyway, he's just a fabulous guy. And to me, it makes more sense for a woman to do a pickpocket act than a man to do a pickpocket.
Make that too. I always thought it was the most commercial thing in the world.
Maybe
doing
a lot
that.
of money.
That through in that way. So you brushed on something I wanted to, and I can't remember what it is. So many exciting ideas going around in this. But you really developed your act so strongly, and you were doing illusions. What was the show you did in Reno? I remember and Lance Burton still uses one of your props to this day, doesn't he?
Well, I had the opportunity to do my own show at Harrah's at Lake Tahoe. It was the first time that they had ever booked a non-celebrity to do a show. And so we did a show called Sorcery 79, and it had some incredible stuff in it. And in that show, I did a version, that was the original version of what I called the 30s act, which was the giant gramophone that Lance did in his show. And when Dick and I got divorced, I wanted to keep the house. Dick got all the magic props, so she sold too. But by that time, I had started a production company. And one of the first people that I hired for my production company to do shows for corporate was a gentleman named Nick Lewin, who is truly, and this isn't just because you're hosting the show, Nick Lewin is one of the greatest corporate performers that ever lived. I mean, absolutely extraordinary corporate performer. I used him on a lot of shows, and just so wonderful and so amazing. So I transitioned, of course, from the magic. But the funniest pickpocket story was when the Marcoses, the head of, was it the Philippines or Malaysia, wherever it was, were at the Magic Castle. And then the whole room was full of Secret Service guys. And so there wasn't much choice who you could get up. So I get two Secret Service guys. And I usually ended the pickpocketing act with the production of their watches. But who can resist when Secret Service guys have shoulder holstered guns? Now they're made to come out of the holster, not stay in the holster. So at the very end, I give them back their watches. And then as the guys were leaving, I said, "Oh, I do have one little gift for you." And I held up both their guns. Now, you couldn't do that today. The audience went totally nuts. It's like, why can't I stage this? This is great. But yeah,
that's a career-defining moment. I remember what you said, something that sparked a memory. You talked about a good publicist. I remember you talking about your first publicity photo, and that maybe you'd share that story. That was.
My goodness! One of the reasons why the castle survived, and this is a name that you all should know, and she should never be forgotten, was a lady named Shirley Carroll. And Shirley is truly the reason. She gave the castle the brand. She is the one that created the castle. She's the one that allowed it to survive, because she's the one that gave it the public image that it was. She's the one that had the AP there for the Dick and I's wedding when we got married, the only first people to ever be married there. Now, Randy, Pitchford, the gentleman that bought the castle, is the only other couple to have been married. But back to the story. So I'm booked on the It's Magic show with my record act, and I'm so proud. And I had no money, zero. I mean, I would literally go, all day without eating, because I had no money. And so I was only like, I don't know, it was maybe 19 or 20, 20 maybe. And so anyway, I come walking in with my first, not my first publicity, but my new publicity picture for the record act. And I had saved $75 to have this picture made. And I walked in, and Shirley Carroll, this brilliant woman, she taught me how to get full page articles in the press. She looks at it. This is the original now, and she rips it up. and she says, "This is not a publicity picture. This is an Aunt Martha picture. I'm going to call." And she calls one of these. I'm going to call a photographer that can do a good job for you. He's one of the top in Hollywood. And I go, Shirley, I don't have any money to pay him. She says, "Diana, I don't care. If you're a professional, you go to the best." It was the best lesson I ever learned. And so she calls this guy. She said, yeah, do me a favor. Yeah, do it for $500. Yeah, just do it for $500. And I said, "I don't know what I can do. I don't have them." She said, "Wash his car if you have to, but get good pictures." Well, those publicity pictures went all over the world, and I used them for years. They got me full page articles in the LA Times and the Oakland Tribune, you name it. And Shirley Carroll, though, is truly a name that you should all know. Unfortunately, she had a falling out with John Schrum, and that was it.
Well, I love that story. And if you get a great publicity photo, use it forever. I've got some taken when I was 30. I still really want to send them out. But, I will let you go for a moment, because